Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Chef Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. Dr. Lopkin, you have some news about, talking about coronavirus this entire podcast, but you mentioned that there's some conspiracy theories about the vaccine. What's about that?
Yeah, there's been new conspiracy theories coming out that really need to be squashed. The government purchased for this vaccine a whole lot of syringes so that it can be delivered. The syringes have RFID tags on them. Now, for those people who don't know what RFID tags, they're generally used for inventory so that they can track the shipments of these syringes and make sure nobody loses them, which unfortunately is a common occurrence with the government, is lost merchandise. Well, there's now a conspiracy theory that they're going to use these RFID chips, either one, to force everybody to get vaccinated, or, and this one's even more crazy, they're going to inject the RFID chips to track people who have been vaccinated. Okay, now, I just want to point out to everybody that, again, if you don't know anything about RFID chips, you go, okay, maybe this is possible. No, not even close. Any RFID chip that's actually small enough to be injected, and there are, only has a range of a couple of meters. So there's no way anybody could use it to track somebody. The longest range RFID chips have a range of about 1 kilometer, and they're way too large to be injected in anyone. So this is an absolutely ridiculous conspiracy theory, and yet I've seen it come up on social media a number of times. People are going, oh, yes, I've researched this, it's happening. No, they're tracking the syringe shipments so they don't lose them. They're not tracking people.
Yeah, but I bet this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of as this vaccine becomes, closer to reality, there'll be an increasing amount of conspiracy theories out there.
I'm sure there will be, and if I've got the timing right, as we're recording this, the FDA is actually meeting to hear expert testimony about whether or not they're going to approve these vaccines. So we should actually know in the next few days if they're approved.
Well, I have no idea why they wouldn't, considering that England is already going ahead with theirs.
Yeah, they're already moving ahead in England. The only problem they've come out with so far is that they have seen problems in people who are immunocompromised. So if you have AIDS, if you are the recipient of an organ transplant, there may be a problem with you getting the vaccine. But other than that, they've seen no problems.
And that's pretty indicative of all vaccines, by the way.
Yes.
Okay, now we're moving to my favorite state, facetiously, California, which sounds very strange, but I'm kind of a nostalgia buff, whatever you want to call it. And I think you can learn a lot through old movies and TV shows. And you look at early 60s TV shows, even comedies, two things. Connecticut and California is like the land of opportunity. It's where you want to be. That has certainly changed, Dr. Lopkin, as we're moving into our next subject, hasn't it?
Oh, it certainly has. Although I have to say, I wonder if it was ever actually that way, because I was just watching some old movies and I am amazed at the socialist messages that were in old movies that I never really paid attention to before. The businessman is always the bad guy. I just watched a Christmas movie. It happened on Fifth Avenue. And in it, a successful millionaire is the bad guy because he doesn't want people squatting in a property that he owns.
Yeah, then that's always
I
been
mean,
a theme. But overall, this whole thing about like, the Dodgers were new. It was just you
yeah,
just can go to California, and unless you were friggin',
reinvent
I don't know,
yourself.
drunk or something, you're gonna do well. But it's really kind of funny. So things have changed. Fast forward 50 years later, hasn't it?
They've changed tremendously. Right now, of course, you have LA and San Francisco in almost complete lockdown. Although, for some reason, California has determined that movie and television production are essential businesses. They're not
Hmm.
essential anywhere else in the country, but they've decided they're essential businesses.
How about
But
in the world? How does that sound, Eric?
yeah, you're starting to see an exodus, and you've seen it to a certain extent, for a couple of years now. But just over the last few weeks, Hewlett Packard, which was formed in Silicon Valley, has moved their headquarters to Texas. Elon Musk has left California. He now lives in Texas. I think there were three other tech companies leaving California for Texas just in the
Okay, but
last few
what
weeks.
do it's a rhetorical question, but Dr. Lopkin, you need to address it. Then why do figures like Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom, why do they keep on continuously being rewarded?
I don't know. I mean, it's absolutely amazing
Connecticut's
to
the
me.
same way.
You look at the state of California, how it's existing, especially in the Bay Area. There has been news report after news report from the San Francisco media. So we're not talking about Fox News or Breitbart. We're talking about San Francisco local news, where they have gone out and reported on the enormous problem they're having with the homeless, with the fact that San Francisco is literally covered in human feces because of this homeless problem. And yet they keep I was talking to somebody who's generally a bright person, but he does work in Los Angeles and he is part of the entertainment industry. And he was saying how intelligent Kamala Harris is. And
Hmm.
it is absolutely amazing how California residents, although again, not all of them, because you're seeing this large exodus, Connecticut residents, who you're also seeing an exodus, are just absolutely brainwashed that the liberal way, it's absolutely correct when you've seen it devastate their home states.
Again, that's my original point. You went from California, the land of milk and honey, to the land of feces. I mean, that's in one generation. That's quite an accomplishment. The only other problem is they export their liberalism, like tipping once
Right.
red states into at least pink, and you shake your head. You left a state. You got out of a bad marriage. Why are you getting remarried to the same spouse? Hello.
Yeah, I don't understand how people could do that. Meanwhile, Texas right now is the most successful economic state in the United States. You've got loads of California companies, and actually, not just California. There is talk that the NASDAQ, that's actually based in New Jersey, is considering moving to Texas. And Texas just altered its state constitution to permanently prohibit the passing of an income tax.
Well, being both Connecticut residents, now at least you are. I remember when Connecticut, yeah, a high income state in terms of you being able to live here. When it didn't have an income tax, it was in the positive in terms of inflow of citizens, and it always balanced its budgets, and it had a really decent business climate. Lowell Weicker in the early '90s put in an income tax, and it's never recovered.
No, it never has. And again, for those of our listeners that are not Connecticut residents and don't know Lowell Weicker, Lowell Weicker was a Republican. So this is
Name
not,
only, but
income
anyway.
tax is not just, a liberal problem. But yeah, basically what happens is the state starts taking in more money and then they spend more money and they spend more. So they keep having to raise the income taxes and raise state sales taxes because the elected officials just become addicted to spending money because that's how they buy votes.
Well, it's
They
the same thing.
throw
To
out,
draw an analogy, it's like people, and it happens all the time. One of the keys to success in terms of savings is living on what you used to previously make. What happens? Someone makes, I'm just throwing out these numbers, $50,000, and then 6 years later they do well in business or whatever vocation they're in, and they're making 120. Guess what? Now they're spending at 120, and they never save more than they did when they were making 50. Happens all the time, by the way.
yes, it does. And most of our states and our federal government is guilty of that. And again, this is not party specific. Both parties do this constantly. And it's time that our leaders learn that this is not their money to spend. This is our money, and we are essentially lending it to them or purchasing services from them, and they need to stop spending more than they have.
When that happens, could you please give me a buzz, okay?
Yeah, I don't see it
Anyway,
happening anytime soon.
anytime, yes. But I guess to conclude this carnivore bite episode, you mentioned the fact that California is on lockdown. Um, do you think it's going to be, as the vaccine's still a couple months away, do you think we're going to see that nationally, and what's behind it really? Because scientifically, it really makes no logical sense.
No, the World Health Organization came out and said these lockdowns do not have any effect. Social distancing, physical distancing has been shown to have an effect. Even masks, it's questionable how much they're really doing. The big thing is to keep people separated by 6 feet or more. And you
Mm-hmm.
can do that without a lockdown. Um, will the lockdowns spread? I think they might spread to certain states. Some governors have already come out and said they are not locking down their economy. They've said in the month of November, 15 million people, Americans, reported that they did not have enough food to get through the month. So, you cannot, take 15 million people and push them into poverty.
No, but you can't take a huge chunk of the population and force them who might have been vulnerable to begin with, some who weren't vulnerable, into contemplating things as drastic as it sounds, like suicide. Look at our nation's youth.
Yeah, the suicide rates have gone up as people have been more isolated. And the fact of the matter is, I know, the nightly news loves hammering on the number of deaths, but we are still talking about 1.6% of the population has the morbidity from COVID. So we're not talking about a large percentage. And even more than that, what's more important is that you do get an immunity after you are exposed. So for those people who are exposed but not dangerous, that it's not a danger to them. If you're young, if you're healthy, then it's not going to be as big a problem. If you are at risk, by all means, self quarantine, keep distant. But forcing the entire population to do that, I don't think it's going to happen. Um, not on a national scale. It may very well happen city by city or in certain states if the rates get too high.
I would agree. And real quick is when you look at athletes who get it, I think I'm shocked. Like the biggest outcome or symptom was, yeah, I had a headache. They're back like in a week. Of course, those are
Right.
athletes. I get it, but they're still young. They're still not in the vulnerable groups. So that's kind of a petri dish of what you just talked about. We will be broadcasting live Friday. We're going to have Keith Reynolds on, and he's going to be talking about some interesting tech and business news that really he's at the forefront of, Dr. Lopkin.
And you can listen live to that on blogtalkradio.com/carnivore radio. We'll see you then Friday at 4.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Lopkin. Thanks to our listeners. We'll see you then.
You've been listening to Carnivore Bites, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us every week on carnivoreradio.com, exvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcast Store, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you find podcasts.